Under the blazing afternoon sun of a quiet, out-of-the-way city, Dwayne Johnson arrived at a luxury motorcycle dealership that seemed entirely out of place in such a modest town. Tucked between a small bakery and a grocery store sat Luxor Motors, its gleaming glass facade reflecting the tranquil streets. Dwayne, known worldwide for his action roles and striking presence, was intentionally incognito. He wore a plain baseball cap pulled low, a simple black t-shirt, and worn jeans. He hoped to go unnoticed by the staff, wanting a genuine experience rather than the fanfare that so often accompanied his visits. After months on a demanding film set, he yearned for a taste of normal life, especially the thrill of riding a new motorcycle, something to fill the void of leaving his beloved custom bike back in Los Angeles. He stepped into the dealership, the scent of polished metal and pristine leather hitting him immediately. Rows of motorcycles, each perched like a sculpture, shone under strategic lighting that highlighted every chrome detail and sleek curve. Near the main entrance, an elegant sign read, "Luxor Motors, built for the elite." The tagline elicited a faint smile from him. Though he was, by any standard, part of an elite class of celebrities, Dwayne craved the intangible sense of connection and freedom that only a powerful two-wheeled machine could provide. The interior was all glass and steel, an architectural statement of modern affluence. A few customers milled about, while employees in crisp collared shirts tended to them. An older gentleman with refined posture inspected a touring model, while a young couple admired a sleek, modern sport bike. Dwayne quietly surveyed them before striding past to examine the rest of the showroom. If he was recognized, no one showed any signs yet. Most were focused on the motorcycles. The hum of subdued conversation and the occasional metallic clang of a demonstration bike on a stand formed the background chorus. He had scarcely begun to browse when a man approached him, wearing a sharp suit and sporting an air of self-assuredness. His name tag read, Damien, head sales representative. With meticulously styled hair and a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, Damien spoke in a polished tone. "Good afternoon, sir," Damien greeted, subtly scanning Dwayne's attire. To him, Dwayne looked like just another curious passerby, not a VIP customer. "Anything in particular you're searching for today?" Dwayne, in his calm, low voice, replied, "I'm here to see what you have in terms of classic muscle. Something with good torque, but also a bit of that timeless appeal. Do you have anything along those lines?" He decided not to name drop or mention his cinematic fame. Damien smiled politely, but there was a hint of condescension in the tilt of his head. "We do carry some top-tier models, but they're high-ticket items for, shall we say, very committed buyers. Anything specific you had in mind?" Dwayne sensed the underlying skepticism. He kept his expression neutral. "I'm open to suggestions. I'm a serious rider, so performance matters a lot to me." A flicker of surprise crossed Damien's face. "Performance," he echoed, then gestured toward a row of shining motorcycles. "Let's start over here, though we'll need to discuss policy if you want a test drive." Something in the man's voice made the encounter feel oddly personal, as if every word was a silent assessment, testing whether Dwayne was truly worthy. As Dwayne followed Damien through the immaculate showroom, he couldn't help noticing how the man barely hid his reservations. The store, Luxor Motors, was known to cater to well-heeled enthusiasts, and from the short greeting, Dwayne inferred that Damien believed he didn't look like one of them. They passed a Ducati in fiery red, a row of streamlined racing bikes, then stopped before a shining cruiser. "This is our Stallion Nova 1300, Damien announced, patting the seat as if it were a prized thoroughbred. "A real showstopper, combining raw power with luxurious finishes. We generally sell to clients who desire exclusivity. Performance is only part of it. There's an image as well." Dwayne raised an eyebrow. "An image?" he repeated. His voice betrayed the slightest hint of amusement. "Yes," Damien said, scanning Dwayne's simple black t-shirt again. "There's a lifestyle that goes hand in hand with these bikes. Most of our customers at Luxor Motors prefer to exude a certain prestige. That's the brand we cultivate. We want to ensure each purchase fits the aesthetic and values we represent." Dwayne gently ran his fingertips across the bike's polished tank, ignoring the layered insinuations. "It's a beauty, no doubt. Good lines and presumably excellent handling. Mind if I hear it run?" Damien hesitated, adopting a practiced smile. Well, before we do that, we typically handle certain formalities. We need to confirm a prospective buyer's credentials. Many of our bikes, like the Nova 1300, are in the upper price bracket, well above what you might find in a standard dealership. If you're genuinely interested, perhaps we can see about scheduling a conversation with our manager. The subtext was clear. Show me you can afford it. Dwayne forced a measured breath. His preference in daily life was to avoid throwing his fame around. He liked to see how people acted without knowing his identity. And sometimes, as onlookers in other shops had proven, that revealed the best or worst in them. He recognized that stance in Damien, the slight arrogance of someone who believed they had rung up countless real customers and pegged Dwayne as a dreamer or a waste of time. All right, Dwayne said simply. Let's do that. Who should I speak to? Damien's eyebrows shot up for a moment, as though he didn't expect Dwayne to persist. Our manager is Mr. Conrad, but he's quite tied up. Usually we do a quick assessment first. Are you sure the Nova 1300 is the direction you want to go? He gestured for Dwayne to follow him to a lounge area near a glass partition overlooking the street. Plush leather chairs and a small coffee table with glossy brochures created an exclusive atmosphere. If you're shopping around, we have more, let's say, entry-level models that might be suitable. An undercurrent of scorn laced his words, as though Dwayne's request was overshadowing a simple reality. He wasn't the type they saw as a big spender. But Dwayne politely took a seat, arms relaxed on the chair's sides. Actually, I have more of a classic inclination, older cruiser style. But I'm willing to see what you recommend. Maybe something akin to a Harley feel or a robust custom bike with some heritage. If the Nova 1300 is the pinnacle, I'd love to see it in detail. Damien exhaled, continuing his forced smile. We can do that, but let's see if we can streamline the process. Let me just gather some information. Your name, contact, any references. We do prefer that test rides be reserved for confirmed potential clients, not just enthusiasts passing by for a thrill. Dwayne's lips pressed together. He recognized this scenario, a staffer trying to shut him down with store policy, but he merely nodded. Fair enough. He reached for a pen and the small info sheet that Damien handed him. The tension in the space was obvious, each man sizing the other up, neither revealing the full truth. For Dwayne, though, it wasn't about the question of money. It was about respect. After scribbling on the form, just enough to satisfy the checkboxes, Dwayne handed it back. Damien gave it a cursory glance, eyebrows knitting when he spotted the name D. Johnson, which meant little to him. The suit folded the paper neatly and said, All right, I'll see if Mr. Conrad can spare a minute. Left alone in the lounge area, Dwayne scanned the showroom. He spotted a few other salespeople attending to their clients with warm enthusiasm, referencing specs from brochures or patiently explaining differences between models. The atmosphere made him wonder whether his own salesman was this condescending with everyone or if it was personal. He guessed it was personal. From his vantage point, Dwayne noticed a battered leather jacket slung over a stand in the corner, clearly someone's personal gear. He appreciated that subtle sign of actual riders in the store, not just suits. A tall man, likely a more junior employee, was dusting the seat of a vintage model. Occasionally, the employee eyed Dwayne curiously, as if suspecting the big man in a hoodie was more than he appeared. Damien returned, wearing a practiced grin that barely masked frustration. Mr. Conrad will be a few minutes. Meanwhile, can I show you something simpler? Our custom heritage line, maybe more approachable. The condescension was clear. By simpler, he implied less expensive. But Dwayne shook his head. I'd like to see the top-tier cruiser you mentioned earlier, the one that's basically a rival to the big Harleys. He tapped his foot lightly. Unless you think I'm unqualified? Damien's face twitched. It's not that. It's just, these are extremely exclusive. We only have a couple in stock. Typically, we confirm genuine intent before we... You understand. He let the words hang, as if it was obvious Dwayne should just scurry away if he couldn't measure up. There was a tension-laced hush as Dwayne rose from the lounge chair, towering over the suit-clad salesman. All right, well, I've come this far, he said calmly. Why not let me see it up close and talk about a test ride? He smiled politely, refusing to feed Damien's hostility, but making it clear he wasn't budging. Damien pursed his lips, then motioned for Dwayne to follow him past rows of gleaming sport bikes, until they reached a roped-off section near the rear. There, on a slightly raised platform, sat the Super Glide R 1500, an imposing cruiser with sweeping lines, half matte black, half glossy chrome, a proud beast of steel. A polished plaque declared it to be the apex of Luxor Motors' lineup. "Well, here it is," Damien announced. "The Super Glide or 1500, our statement piece. Price is, of course, quite steep." Dwayne quietly circled the bike, eyes alight with true admiration. "Torque specs?" he asked, kneeling to examine the engine. "Displacement? Transmission specifics?" Damien hesitated, then began rattling off figures. But Dwayne didn't wait for the salesman to finish. He lightly brushed his palm over the seat leather. "Beautiful. Yes, this is exactly what I'm after," he said, half to himself. "So we'll talk about the process for a test ride?" Damien's expression darkened. "We have policies, as I mentioned. Typically, we require certain financial guarantees, or we only allow test rides if we're convinced the buyer is prepared." He paused, voice dropping to a near murmur. "No offense, but you might be more comfortable with one of our base options." Dwayne felt a shift in the air. The room grew quiet around them as a few employees and clients caught wind of the tension. He stood, facing Damien. "Is there a reason you keep insisting I can't handle or afford this?" His tone was measured but unmistakably firm. Damien flinched, struggling to keep composure. The question had cut through his facade. "I'm simply upholding store policy, sir. We can't just hand a $60,000 motorcycle over to anyone who walks in." A biting undertone accompanied his words, a clear attempt to dissuade Dwayne from pressing further. But the big man in the hoodie did not look deterred. With the standoff intensifying, an older woman who had been browsing a custom chopper not far off gave the scene a disapproving frown. It was evident to her that Damien's attitude went beyond normal caution. She'd glimpsed the condescending glances, heard the veiled remarks. She quietly slid away, perhaps to alert a more senior staff member. But as it happened, Mr. Conrad, the store manager, emerged from a side office at precisely that moment. Middle-aged, neatly dressed, his graying hair styled in a conservative cut, Conrad approached with a polite but inquisitive look. "Damien, everything okay here?" he asked, scanning from the polished Super Glide to the imposing figure of Dwayne, who towered near it. Damien cleared his throat. "Mr. Conrad, this gentleman is interested in test driving our Super Glide R 1500, but I was explaining the rules." He forced a polite smile, a veneer that barely hid his frustration at being forced into the spotlight. Conrad's gaze flickered from Dwayne's reserved posture to the faint tension on Damien's face. "I see," Conrad said. "And how can we be of help, sir?" He directed the question calmly to Dwayne. "I'm looking to test ride your top cruiser," Dwayne answered, noticing how Conrad's manner was more measured than Damien's. "But it seems there's some hesitation to let me do that. I was told it's a policy matter." A short hush lingered. Conrad gave a quick, reproachful glance at Damien before stepping forward, folding his hands. "We do have a strict policy. This is an expensive machine, and we only have one unit in stock. Typically, we require certain financial verifications or a relationship with the store. Might I ask if you've purchased from Luxor Motors before?" He remained professional, not yet recognizing who Dwayne was, but at least not condescending in the same manner as Damien. Dwayne, for his part, nodded. "I understand you're protective of your merchandise. That's fair, but I'd like you to know I'm serious about this. If the ride goes well, I plan to purchase on the spot." Some employees had drifted closer, pretending to reorganize brochures or wipe down displays, but truly eavesdropping. The store's music, a subdued acoustic track, seemed overshadowed by the silent tension. "Well," Conrad said, "provided we can confirm you have the appropriate background and so forth, I see no problem. Could you fill out some forms, maybe share identification and driver's license details? Then I can personally authorize a short test ride." He said it politely, but Dwayne sensed the hidden test. Produce the right documents or be turned away. "That's no problem at all," Dwayne replied, rummaging in his pocket. He withdrew his license, handing it to Conrad. As Conrad skimmed the name, his face shifted, though he tried to maintain composure. D. Johnson, the manager read aloud, likely not connecting the name to the iconic star just yet. Dwayne made no move to clarify his identity. If they recognized him, fine, but he didn't want special favors based on celebrity. He wanted fairness, the same chance any dedicated writer deserved. He exhaled, meeting Conrad's gaze. "So if my license checks out, we can do this?" Damien's face tightened, apparently disgruntled that Conrad might give the green light. The manager gave a small nod. "Certainly. Let me run a quick check, then we can proceed if all aligns with policy." Conrad strolled toward the back office to verify Dwayne's license, leaving Damien and Dwayne standing awkwardly beside the Grand Superglide. The tension between them was palpable. It was clear Damien disliked the situation, perhaps frustrated that Dwayne had circumvented his efforts to block the test ride. As they waited, Dwayne decided to break the silence. "You seem uneasy," he observed, his tone level. "Would you prefer I didn't ride the bike?" Damien let out a short, humorless chuckle. "I'm just ensuring our store's interest, that's all. Most who walk in with that kind of request don't simply buy on a whim, and you keep saying you will if you like it. It's unusual." "Sometimes life is unusual," Dwayne said with a small shrug. "I'm not here to waste anyone's time." He let the statement hang, hoping Damien would glean some humility, or at least courtesy. But the salesman seemed unconvinced. A discreet hush fell across the showroom again when Conrad returned, a single piece of paper in hand. He wore a slightly perplexed expression, as if he'd discovered something surprising about D. Johnson, but wasn't sure how to address it. Approaching them, the manager coughed lightly to gather himself. "Well," Conrad began, "everything checks out. The license is valid, and from what I see, there's no reason we can't proceed with the test ride." He shifted, glancing between Dwayne and Damien. "Mr. Johnson, if you'll follow me, I'll show you where we can move the motorcycle outside. We have a small track for quick evaluation rides." Damien's lips parted as if to protest, but no words came out. Tension played in his eyes, perhaps realizing he'd lost this little battle. Meanwhile, a flicker of curiosity lit the faces of employees and passers-by, none quite sure who D. Johnson was or why the vibe felt so charged. "Thank you," Dwayne said simply. He donned his cap more securely and followed Conrad to the side entrance, where a wide set of glass doors led to the dealership's private test track. Along the way, Conrad rattled off a few disclaimers: speed limits, recommended safety gear, and the store's insurance coverage for test drives. Dwayne acknowledged them with polite nods. He'd done test rides countless times at different dealerships throughout his life. Nothing here was out of the ordinary from that standpoint. They halted in front of a large overhead door. The inside staff had already wheeled the Superglide onto a small ramp. A fleeting hush overcame the place as Dwayne approached, took hold of the handlebars, and swung his leg over the seat. Conrad watched at first with typical caution, but soon enough recognized that Dwayne's stance, his comfort with the bike's weight and geometry, revealed genuine riding experience. "Engine kill switch is here, ignition's there," Conrad muttered, mostly out of obligation. Dwayne nodded, flicking the switch. The engine roared to life with a deep, throaty rumble that reverberated off the walls. A grin flickered across Dwayne's face. Despite the uneasy preamble, that raw mechanical sound reignited his passion, reminding him why he loved riding so much. Dwayne gingerly revved the engine, feeling the power through the handlebars. The staff parted to the sides, and with a graceful shift of the gear, he guided the Superglide R 1500 onto the test track. A warm breeze caressed his face as he picked up speed, the wheels gripping the asphalt firmly. The sun's light danced on the bike's chrome details, intensifying its allure. A single loop around the track turned into two, then three. Damien and Conrad watched from the open bay door. The employees, too, lingered, attracted by the spectacle of a man, apparently at one with a machine, someone who had the intangible synergy of skill, confidence, and deep respect for the bike's capabilities. Under the late afternoon sun, Dwayne wove through the short test course, leaning into the curves with a fluid control that left little doubt. He was no novice. After a few more passes, Dwayne eased the throttle, gently brought the bike to a stop near Conrad, and cut the engine. He swung his leg off the seat, removed his cap, a slight gleam of sweat on his brow. The moment he set the bike's kickstand, he turned to Conrad with a wide smile. "This is quite the machine. Smooth handling at low speeds, powerful acceleration when you open it up. In the design, clean lines, a classic feel despite modern specs." Conrad exhaled in relief. He'd half expected something to go wrong, but obviously that fear was misplaced. "So it meets your standards, Mr. Johnson?" he asked. Dwayne brushed a hand over the seat as though reluctant to part ways with it. "Yes. Honestly, it's exactly what I hoped for." He paused, straightening. "Now, I promised if I liked it, I'd buy it right away. So let's talk final numbers." Damien, who had hung back with crossed arms, face clouded with a mixture of annoyance and perplexity, now stepped up. Clearing his throat, he tried to salvage his earlier stance. "If you're truly serious about purchasing, I can prepare the necessary documents. Our top-tier financing options and extended warranty plans might interest you." His tone was no longer mocking, but not exactly apologetic either. "That would be great," Dwayne answered politely, though a trace of wry humor flickered in his eyes. He could sense the shift in how the staff regarded him. The single test ride had proven more than his skill. It established a near certainty that he was a genuine buyer, someone who not only handled the bike gracefully, but was prepared to sign on the dotted line for a large sum. Conrad nodded, smiling professionally. "Right this way, Mr. Johnson. We'll handle the paperwork in my office. Damien, you can assist with the details." As they walked inside, the employees resumed their tasks, though a visible ripple of excitement coursed through the showroom. The quiet buzz of conversation turned to whispered commentary. "He's definitely not just anyone. He rides like a pro," or even, "He looks so familiar. Is he famous?" Meanwhile, the manager led Dwayne into a glass-walled office behind the main display area. Through the transparent panels, Dwayne glimpsed the rest of the store, the lines of bikes, the employees, and a few curious onlookers. Conrad's office was all sleek lines and minimalist decor. A black desk, a large computer screen, a few promotional photos of their top-tier bikes on the walls. The manager motioned for Dwayne to sit in a comfortable leather chair while he settled behind the desk. Damien hovered in the doorway, uncertain whether to stay or leave, eventually stepping in awkwardly to assist. Dwayne removed his cap, rested it on his knee. He was accustomed to signing deals quickly when it came to bikes. Once he found a model he loved, he didn't dally. But he recalled the earlier friction, especially from the salesman. He couldn't let that pass without addressing it. Conrad swiveled his screen so Dwayne could see the price details, plus optional service packages. "Here are the breakdowns for the Super Glide R1500. We offer a standard 2-year warranty with an extended warranty available for purchase. If you want extra customization, that can also be arranged." He spoke in a measured tone, trying to maintain the professional courtesy that should have been present from the start. Dwayne nodded, scanning the numbers. "Looks straightforward. I'll pay in full. No need for financing or extended plans. But there's something else I'd like to bring up before we finalize." He fixed his gaze first on Conrad, then momentarily on Damien, whose expression grew uneasy. "Of course," Conrad said, clasping his hands. "We want you to be fully satisfied with every aspect of this purchase." Dwayne exhaled. "I appreciate that. However, the big question is, how do you treat customers who aren't recognized or perceived as having the resources to buy? Because from what I saw earlier, it's pretty clear some folks get turned away before they can even test a bike." Conrad's face paled slightly. "I apologize if Mr. Damien's approach caused offense," he began, shooting a glance that made the salesman shrink. "In fairness, we do have policies to filter out casual browsers from truly interested clients. But I suspect there may have been a personal interpretation of those policies at play." Damien tried to speak, but a single raised hand from Conrad silenced him. Dwayne appreciated the manager's willingness to handle the issue head-on. "I'm not here for personal vengeance," Dwayne explained calmly. "As I've said, I intend to purchase the bike. But I also want to ensure that the next person who walks in wearing jeans and a cap doesn't get treated as though they're wasting your time. A shift in the manager's demeanor signaled he recognized a bigger lesson. We pride ourselves on offering an exclusive product, but that doesn't give us leeway to judge a book by its cover, he admitted. Your experience today underscores the need for changes. Dwayne gave a small nod. If you adopt a new approach, maybe training all staff on better empathy and respect, I'd consider that a greater victory than just riding out with this bike. He leveled a direct look at Damien. Perhaps you can see how a scornful approach might alienate genuine, passionate customers. Damien cleared his throat, clasping his hands behind his back. Yes, I realize I see what you're saying, he murmured, swallowing what might have been pride. Conrad nodded gravely, sliding a document across the table for Dwayne to sign. Here's the standard purchase agreement for the R1500, and you have my word, Mr. Johnson. We'll revise how we greet and qualify potential clients. This store was built on the premise of high-end motorcycling, but we never intended to shut people out or make them feel unwelcome. Dwayne accepted a pen. I'm glad to hear it, he said, scanning the details. Consider it part of your brand improvement, less about exclusivity, more about genuine passion for the ride. With a quick flourish, he signed. The manager countersigned, affixing official stamps. The sale was done. Just like that, the tension that had overshadowed the day settled into a sense of resolution. Damien awkwardly reached forward to gather the forms. I'll finalize your receipt, he offered. It was a subdued shift from his earlier arrogance, an acknowledgement that he'd overstepped. Dwayne nodded politely, sensing that the salesman was struggling to handle the embarrassment of his earlier judgments. A new hush fell as the manager handed Dwayne a folder containing the official ownership papers and a few special promotional items, a branded leather keychain, a matching helmet design, and a certificate of authenticity for the limited-run Super Glide. Dwayne chuckled upon receiving them. Well, that's quite the package. Conrad forced a slight smile. Part of the service. I'd be honored if you keep Luxor Motors in mind for future purchases. Or at least, maybe speak favorably if anyone asks. Dwayne considered it, wondering if he'd even mention the store by name publicly, but he acknowledged the sentiment. I'll remember the store, especially if these new steps happen. I might check back in a few months to see if you've made progress. A flicker of genuine sincerity crossed Conrad's face. We will, count on it. With business concluded, employees started milling about again. A few tried sneaking glimpses of Mr. Johnson, presumably suspecting he was more than an average Joe. Some recognized the voice from interviews, or possibly recognized his face from blockbuster posters. Word was spreading quickly. He's a known actor, right? Whispered a staffer to her colleague. I think so. Another employee, younger, seemed starstruck but kept her distance. Dwayne gathered his documents, helmet, and the small freebies. Before leaving the office, he turned to Damien. No hard feelings. Just try not to judge the next person too soon. Damien's cheeks tinged slightly pink. I appreciate that, and I'll remember. Then, with a firm handshake shared with Conrad, Dwayne stepped back onto the main showroom floor. The watchers parted in silence and giving him space. Some nodded or offered discreet waves. Others watched in awe, suspecting they'd just seen a major star finalize a big purchase. He paused near the Super Glide R1500, still perched near the track entrance. The sunlight streaming through the glass highlighted its polished curves. Shall we load it up onto a transport, or can I ride off now? Dwayne asked, glancing at Conrad. We can arrange delivery, but if you want to take it now, you're free to, the manager replied, relieved that an amicable conclusion had been reached. With a nod, Dwayne decided he'd ride away on his new purchase. A part of him yearned to feel the wind in his face again, something he'd lacked for weeks due to an intense filming schedule. The employees hurriedly readied the final touches. Someone checked the tire pressure, topped off the tank. Another staffer approached offering a gorgeous black riding jacket emblazoned with the Luxor Motors logo, a courtesy gift to commemorate the sale. Dwayne accepted it with a small, grateful smile, but mentally noted it was slightly more promotional than personal. While they prepared the bike, a handful of customers who had witnessed the entire scene approached him. One older man with silver hair said quietly, "Never seen a store manager pivot like that. You did good. Another younger woman added, thank you for standing up to that salesman's attitude. My husband and I felt out of place here before, but now it feels like maybe the store will change. Their words affirmed that intangible impact beyond the sale, a subtle shift in the store's energy, a reminder that prejudice can be confronted. Dwayne kept his replies humble. We all need good bikes, right? Doesn't matter how we look. He parted from them gently, appreciating their supportive words. Then, stepping outside, he found the day was still bright, though the sun now hung lower in the sky. The dealership's glass facade reflected a scenic horizon of rooftops and trees, giving the building an almost ephemeral shimmer. Conrad accompanied him out, awkwardly clearing his throat. Again, Mr. Johnson, I'm sorry for any inconvenience. His voice dropped. I recognized your name, of course, once I ran your license. You see, I wasn't sure if we should mention it. We usually deal with, local folks who want top-shelf bikes, but obviously we're honored. Dwayne raised a hand politely. No need to elaborate. If people recognized me or not was irrelevant to me. I just wanted to be treated fairly. That's all. The manager nodded, relieved at the calm tone. Yes, absolutely. I do hope you'll return. And well, if you ever want a different model, we'll have a less complicated process next time, Conrad said with a half smile. Mounting the Supra Glide R 1500. Dwayne inhaled the crisp air. The engine purred smoothly beneath him. He donned the new riding jacket, zipped it partway, then slipped on his older, scuffed helmet. Despite the store's attempts to brand him, he was more at home wearing gear that had been tried and tested on countless roads. He looked up at the staff gathering behind Conrad, all in a subdued, watchful group, some curious, some slightly embarrassed. Among them was Damien, his arms folded, feigning casualness. Their eyes locked briefly, and the salesman gave a nod, maybe a silent apology or truce. And with that, Dwayne started the engine. The deep rumble reverberated across the parking lot, turning heads. He revved lightly, a grin creeping across his face as he felt the raw horsepower. Thank you all, he announced, voice cutting through the drone of the engine. Then twisting the throttle, he guided the cruiser onto the main road. The staff stood by, some still in awe, as the big man and his brand new motorcycle disappeared down the quiet boulevard, the sound of the engine fading into the distance. Once on the open road, Dwayne shifted into higher gear, the bike responding like a well-trained stallion. The wind whipped around him, carrying away the lingering stress of dealing with prejudice, leaving behind a sense of liberation. He rode through the gentle outskirts of the city, where tall trees lined a well-maintained highway, and the sunshine cast dappled patterns across the pavement. For a moment, he let himself forget about fame, film scripts, or even the confrontation with the store. He was simply a rider, immersed in that perfect synergy of man and machine. Eventually, he veered down a scenic route that looped around a small lake. The crystal water sparkled like jewels under the fading sky, and families picnicked along the shore. A few heads turned to watch the imposing figure on the glossy black cruiser, but Dwayne paid them little mind. He cherished the anonymity that the helmet afforded him. A simple cap now stowed in his bag. He considered how quickly perceptions can shift. In that dealership, he had gone from unqualified onlooker to valued customer, all because a manager recognized him. Yet none of that recognition was relevant to his actual skill or intent. The memory of it stung a bit, prompting him to mull over the inherent biases that plague many high-end showrooms. As the sun began to set, painting the sky a wash of oranges and purples, Dwayne found a roadside cafe. He parked, took a seat on a bench by the water, and let the evening's hush envelop him. Removing his helmet, he set it gently on the seat next to him, exhaling in satisfaction. The motorcycle gleamed in the last rays of sunlight, a testament to his day's success, though success in a deeper sense than just acquiring a new toy. He recalled how back at Luxor Motors, his final words had spurred the manager to commit to changing the store's approach. The cynic in him wondered if it was real or just for show, but the idealist, the part of him that believed people could improve, hoped it would last. After all, prejudice can't be undone overnight, but a single encounter can spark reflection and eventually real policy change. Wind rustled the trees, carrying distant laughter from families finishing their lakeside stroll. Dwayne realized that tomorrow he would be back on the film set, returning to a world of bright lights, choreographed stunts, and orchestrated illusions. But today was real. He fought a quiet battle against small-mindedness, and if that small victory made the dealership a more welcoming place for the next person in casual clothes, it mattered. At length, he rose, deciding to ride the scenic loop one last time before heading to his temporary lodgings. Tomorrow, he'd have lines to rehearse, camera crews to face. But tonight, he had two wheels, an open road, and a fresh sense of clarity about how a single action can shift an entire perspective. News of the day's incident at Luxor Motors spread through the small city in the following days, though not in the grand tabloid fashion that typically trails a celebrity. It rippled more quietly through locals and fans who happened to catch wind of the big friendly biker who turned out to be Dwayne Johnson. Employees at the store told relatives about how a tall man in a hoodie unexpectedly taught the staff a lesson in humility, and how the manager had made an on-the-spot vow to reevaluate store policies. Some local riders who had faced similar gatekeeping in the past felt validated by the story. If even a global star could be misjudged, then clearly the store's prejudice was a systematic issue. In an effort to follow through, Manager Conrad swiftly scheduled a meeting with the entire staff, including the perplexed but newly chastened Damien. The meeting's gist: we can't continue to treat potential customers with suspicion based on how they dress or whether we assume they can pay. Every individual who sets foot in here deserves courtesy and an open mind. The staff was directed to undergo a new training program focusing on empathy and customer engagement, ironically matching Dwayne's suggestion. Some employees embraced the idea wholeheartedly, while others seemed reluctant. But the manager insisted, reminding them how damaging that single confrontation could have been if word of mouth turned negative. Back at the set, Dwayne resumed his schedule of early morning calls, stunts, and lines to memorize. In quiet moments, he'd reflect on the store, on how close it came to outright insulting him because he wasn't wearing a tailored suit or announcing his net worth. He'd smile wryly. He was used to stepping onto red carpets in custom tuxedos, but also cherished these small acts of normalcy, like walking into a shop incognito. The gap between these extremes reminded him that fame was ephemeral, while real character, both his own and that of others, revealed itself in everyday interactions. One evening, a co-star recognized the new bike parked at the production lot and exclaimed, "Damn, that's sweet. Where'd you get it?" Dwayne chuckled, giving a succinct version of events. The co-star responded with amusement, "That's wild. So they basically tried to ban you from a test ride? Then had to eat their words?" Dwayne nodded, half laughing. "Pretty much, but if it helps them change, that's the real reward." Slowly, the anecdote circulated around the set, morphing into yet another legendary, nice guy but firm, Dwayne Johnson story. People recounted how he politely overcame prejudice, never losing his composure. Meanwhile, in the city, some local riders, hearing the news from store employees, visited Luxor Motors to check if the policy was truly changing. They found new signs proclaiming, "Everyone welcome to inquire about test rides," and staff seemed a bit more open-minded than before. More than a few gave credit to that day's unexpected confrontation. D. Johnson changed things, they joked. For his part, Dwayne had no illusions that he single-handedly revolutionized the store, but he found satisfaction that a small push could yield a bigger shift. On weekends, if he had free time, he'd take the Supra Glide R 1500 for leisurely spins around the outskirts. He enjoyed the unhurried pace of the local roads, where passers-by sometimes recognized him and waved, or didn't recognize him at all, and it didn't matter, because for him the essence of riding was independence, not attention. Time passed, and production on Dwayne's film neared completion. On one of his final afternoons in that distant city, he decided to drop by Luxor Motors once again. He was curious to see if Conrad's promised reforms had materialized. Pulling into the showroom's parking lot, he parked the majestic black Supra Glide R 1500 that was now unmistakably his. Removing his helmet, he caught sight of a newly posted sign in the window. "All riders welcome, new test drive policy in effect." Stepping inside, he found the same sleek interior design, the same array of glimmering bikes, but something intangible felt different. At the reception, a young employee, someone he hadn't encountered before, greeted him with genuine warmth. "Hello, sir. Welcome to Luxor Motors. Looking for anything in particular today?" Her smile was real, lacking the phony politeness that once masked hidden judgments. Dwayne gave a small nod. "Just checking in on how things are going." The employee didn't recognize him, or if she did, she maintained her courtesy. "We've introduced a new approach," she added proudly, "where we treat every visitor as a potential rider, no matter what. We aim to make them feel at home. Our manager insists that's the Luxor way now." He wandered toward the main floor, noticing a posted set of guidelines for staff. Language about ensuring each customer has a chance to explore the bikes. Test rides possible upon standard license checks. No extraneous demands or superficial judgments. The entire vibe was more inclusive. Near the middle of the floor stood Damien, rearranging brochures on a glass stand. He glimpsed Dwayne's arrival and approached with hesitant steps, searching for words. "Mr. Johnson, good to see you again," he managed, cheeks reddening with what might have been lingering embarrassment. Dwayne studied his expression. "How are things, Damien?" he asked, his voice calm but direct. "I see the store made some changes." Damien nodded rapidly, as though grateful for the prompt. "Yeah, Mr. Conrad instituted new training. We talked about how we evaluate riders too strictly. I realized I was, well, biased. I'm trying to do better." He shifted his weight, exhaling. "I owe you an apology, sir. I judged you by your clothes and didn't even try to hide it. That was wrong." Dwayne allowed a small, gracious smile. "Apology accepted. I'm glad you're embracing the changes." He paused, letting the man absorb his sincerity. "I wasn't personally offended. I've seen it before. But it was important to call it out so that it doesn't keep happening." Damien's face reflected a blend of relief and humility. "Thank you. I appreciate the chance to grow from it." He gestured around. "We get a mix of visitors now, some with big budgets, some not. But the difference is we treat them all with respect, show them each bike, answer every question. And you know what? We've actually sold more bikes in the last few weeks than usual. Word's getting around that the place is welcoming." Dwayne chuckled. "Sounds like you discovered a new formula for success." Damien gave a nod, stepping aside as another potential buyer approached, a middle-aged woman in worn jeans and a flannel shirt. The salesman quickly turned to greet her with the same courtesy he once reserved for suits. Dwayne watched with satisfaction, seeing the transformation unfold in real time. People who might have been dismissed before were now guided to each model, invited to ask questions, offered a real chance to explore. Thus assured, Dwayne made his exit, lightly patting the polished fuel tank of a passing model. On his way out, manager Conrad appeared, gave him a handshake, and said, "We owe you more than a sale, Mr. Johnson. Thanks for teaching us." With a final wave, Dwayne walked out into the sunlight, returning to his cherished black Supra Glide in the lot. Revving the engine, he sped away, reflecting on how a single unpleasant interaction had triggered a chain of events that made a difference. There was a new glimmer at Luxor Motors, one of genuine openness, bridging the gap between image and authenticity, just as Dwayne had hoped all along.